This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore. The presidency of Donald Trump was a trauma for the United States. It was a stress test to see how our institutions would hold up under the stress of an authoritarian goon. They held, they bent, they didn't break. Next time we might not be so lucky, though. And the trauma culminated in the events of January 6th, the insurrection, the attempted overthrow of the United States government, the attempted overturning of a free and fair election. Over 150 cops were injured, some of whom lost fingers. Some lost their lives. Fueled by a distrust and contempt for democracy. And it looks like they're planning a part 2. I'm going to read a little bit from this article from The Independent. Capitol Police brace for a huge MAGA protest backing January 6 rioters. Comes as Trump's former data chief says they plan on going back to the Capitol. A part 2. And they are unabashedly promoting it in an effort, I believe, to stoke fear, to reopen psychic and real literal wounds. U.S. Capitol Police say they are aware of a proposed rally that supporters of former President Donald Trump are planning in support of people who were arrested in connection to the insurrection on January 6th. Matt Braynard, who was the data chief for Mr. Trump's campaign, told former White House strategist Chief Steve Bannon on Mr. Bannon's podcast about a planned rally at the Capitol on behalf of political prisoners who were arrested for their January 6th actions. Quote, "We're going back to the Capitol, right where it started, and it's going to be huge," Matt Braynard said. "We're going to push back on the phony narrative that there was an insurrection." We all witnessed it, Matt Braynard. You don't need to push back on any phony narrative. We all have eyes, dipshit. We saw what we saw. We saw the racist gathering of white nationalists and separatists and white supremacists. Camp Auschwitz shirts. A spokesman for the United States Capitol Police said they cannot provide permits or details about security plans. Quote, "We are aware of the proposed rally," the spokesperson said. Well, that is good because they were not prepared for the first one. Whether it be faulty intelligence relative to the actual threat that was posed by these assholes, or the fact that it was a largely and overwhelmingly white crowd, so, it's going to be fine. They love the cops. Blue Lives Matter and such. Either way, it was a failure on the part of D.C. government, the federal government, the Pentagon, all stemming from the White House. Mr. Braynard told Mr. Bannon that the day was largely peaceful and that rioters were egged on in many cases by Capitol Police. Squarely shifting the blame from that of the insurrectionists to the police. It's their fault that there was a hangman's gallows set up on the lawn of the Capitol with the adherents of QAnon and racist ideologies screaming, "Hang Mike Pence." Shame on you, Capitol Police. It's your fault that they wanted to murder the vice president. Shameful. Anyway, I have a 1-minute piece of video here of this dipshit on Mike Bannon's show from which these quotes were taken. And you got to watch it because it is remarkable what's this guy's game? The chief data strategist. Was his name not well enough known? Like the QAnon shaman? He wants his face among them. Let's start and stop and watch this.
Actually going to make some news on your show today. We have our next rally planned. It's in the middle of September, September 18th, and it's going to be huge. And what's going to define it is where it's going to take place. We're going back to the Capitol.
That is a threat. That is a reimagining of what could have taken place. We failed the first time. We're going back. This individual needs to be investigated. This isn't just about free speech or the freedom to assemble, because you don't have a constitutional right to have an insurrection. You don't have a constitutional right to treason, Matt Braynard. And you do not have an insurrection to incite a mob to violence.
Right where it started, on September 18th. And we're going to push back against the phony narrative that there was an insurrection. We're going to provide the kind of evidence that Nancy Pelosi won't allow to be presented at her select committee, showing that this was a largely peaceful crowd.
Largely
this
peaceful.
Was a crowd that was egged on in many ways by Capitol Police throwing flashbang grenades into a relatively peaceful crowd.
So far, it's largely peaceful. And then he dumbs it down just a little bit, and then now it's relatively peaceful. It's a relatively peaceful crowd. Well, it needs to be peaceful in order to be a legal protest, Matt Braynard. Relatively peaceful doesn't cut it when you're attempting to overthrow the United States government, an event that millions of people watch live on TV.
We're going to present the evidence that Ashley Babbitt's death should be investigated. We're going to demand.
Again, up is down, wrong is right. Ashley Babbitt's death was investigated. Ashley Babbitt, again, an anti-government separatist, QAnon adherent, wild, wacky conspiracy theorist who attempted to enter the House chamber when guns were drawn upon her. Had she broken through, the rest of the mob likely would have broken through. And that certainly was the fear of the person who pulled the trigger, ultimately taking her life.
The release of 14,000 hours of videotape that the federal government has been suppressing. So we're going right back to the Capitol.
How much video is there? Sorry. How much video is there out there? How much video have you seen? There is copious amounts of evidence of the violence, of the threats, of the attacks on officers, beating them with United States flags as they wear Trump flags as capes. It's disgusting.
Because we're not afraid, and we're going to press our case. And I believe that at that we're going to have some very high-profile speakers there. We're going to have members of Congress speak.
There's one more stop I'm going to do after this. This is important. This, among everything else he said, I think is the most important thing. And that is they're going to have high-profile speakers and members of Congress. And this is what you need to pay attention to. When they go back and they have members of Congress come out and speak prior to what could be a violent rally, another insurrection part 2, who's going to put their reputation and freedom on the line to speak in advance of this, of this mob? Who's going to do that? Marjorie Taylor Greene certainly will. She's got no reputation to defend. Lauren Boebert, who's given tours just days before the insurrection, she'll probably speak. Matt Gaetz, what's he got to lose? Who else, though? We need to remember their names, and we'll wrap with this.
We're going to continue to raise the volume and push back against this phony narrative and demand justice for these political prisoners.
That is where they're going with this. That these are political prisoners. They're trying to flip the script. They're trying to rewrite history. This is absolutely a whitewashing of something we all witnessed with our own eyes. It is collective gaslighting. I know what I saw. I know how alarmed I was. And I know those that I love witnessed the same thing. And we witnessed it again when the footage was released in the subsequent days, during the impeachment trial, and since. The new footage that we've seen, the melee, the eye gouging, the violence, the calls for the assassination of the Vice President of the United States. So get the out of here, Matt Braynard, with your bullshit, with your threats to my country, with your threats to my democracy. You are a reprehensible, sinister weasel. We'll keep it PG here. Disgusting. I'd love to know what you think, though. You can leave me a brief voicemail. I'd love to hear from you. 714-576-4054. Of course, you can email me, regular old-fashioned email, to daily@dollemore.com. I sure do appreciate you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for engaging with my content. I hope you'll tune in next week from Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We'll all be guest hosting for David Pakman. I want to say thanks to David for thinking of me, asking me to co-host. That's flattering, and I am humbled. It's going to be a good time. Anyway, if I bring you value, and I would ask that you consider supporting my work here on the platform, you can click the join button here on YouTube, see what's involved to become a channel member. For fewer than $2 a month, you can support my work there, help produce my work. You can also go over to patreon.com/IDoubtItPodcast. That's another way to support what I do here. I appreciate you. I hope you have a great weekend. I'll see you next time. Until I do, be genuine. Take care of one another.